All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's live stream. I'm really excited today because we've got Tabasco, the head of DevRel at Particle Network, here with us today. He's been instrumental in shaping Particle's ecosystem and is leading some really exciting developments in the space. We're going to deep dive into what makes a TG truly successful, the ins and outs of airdrops, and the future of Particle Network. So, Tabasco, thank you so much for joining us today. How's everything going on your end?
Doing pretty good. Thank you for having me. I think it's been maybe 4 or 5 months since I last joined a live stream with you guys, and so I think, of course, a lot has happened since then, including our TGE, among many other things. And so, yeah, I'm excited to get into it. I think that there's a lot of very interesting topics here that I have some hot takes on. So,
Amazing, amazing. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. So let's dive right in. Tabasco, if you were to design a TG playbook from scratch today, say a TG 101, what are the top three elements you'd focus on? What would be at the core of your strategy?
yeah, personally, my take. I think usually, a lot of people will kind of say that a common few thing is like community and airdrop, make sure these things are good. But I think for me personally, the playbook in Web3 is changing to really, I think token launches should happen alongside with and after you have a product with clear product market fit and really revenue. This is really important. And so I think the top three things that I would really focus on if I were to like myself do a TGE with my own product and kind of start over again would be number one, definitely having a product that's actually backing it. I think what happens a lot of the time is the days of launching a token before you have any sort of like real product or proven PMF or anything, I think those days are over. And you can see that I think clearly, especially over the long term, tokens that are launched alongside real products that can actually maintain mindshare, that can maintain usage, always actually end up being more on track with the growth of that product. The second thing I definitely think is revenue, and so not only having a product that works, but having revenue and being able to back that token launch with saying, look, we've made this much revenue. We're actually proving that this product has demand, it has traction, and people are willing to pay to use it. And then also having clear utility for that token alongside that TGE, I think is also really important. Same thing, I think a lot of protocols, what happens is that they launch a token, there's not really any product, there's not really a clear purpose for the token, but it's there as mainly a speculative vehicle. But I think whenever you're looking at a token and its growth over the long term, you want a strong product that's attached to it. You want strong utility, and you want to be able to understand really like why does this token exist, not only in the context of the product that it's commonly associated with, but also in the context of the growth of its ecosystem that it's attached to. And then, of course, that revenue proves that that token has some tangible material backing other than just pure speculation, that there's actual demand behind the product that it represents to some degree. And so these things I think are really important. And previously, I think they were overlooked, but hopefully, I think what we're starting to see now is a shift in the ecosystem towards a focus on those core three things. Like I think previously, that take of saying, "Oh, you should definitely focus on product and revenue and token utility," that might have not been as common maybe a year ago. I think definitely we saw a lot of these very intangible token launches a year ago, but I think especially getting into now sort of the bear market, I think people are starting to focus more on actually having a materially backed token launch where you say, okay, I've proven myself as a protocol, and I've proven that I actually have core utility here, and that there's a reason to launch this token that tracks with the product and tracks with the ecosystem growth. And this is also what we try to focus on this as well in terms of our own token launch. But I think even independently, if I were to launch a token, these would be the core three things that I'd focus on, because you know long term, nothing beats having proof that you can actually grow, and that actually is proving that this token actually has something tangible behind it. And so I think this is a very, very important thing, that those are the core three things. So product, revenue, and token utility, I would say. If you can nail those down, especially over the course of a year, 2 year, 4 years, I think that's really where you start to see that long-term growth.
Amazing, really solid points. So now looking back at your launch experience, what's one decision you're really proud of?
I think the way that we rolled it out and with our marketing, I think we did that really well. Of course, like the launch overall was fantastic in my opinion. I'm biased, but I think we got a lot of good listings. We had Binance and OKX and that kind of stuff, and the reception to it was really good. I think the way that we roll out the marketing was such that in a way where at least the people that I talked to, during the day, or really 48 hours of the token launch, basically the entire timeline was about party and the particle network token launch and that kind of stuff, which I was very happy about because, of course, as somebody who does a lot of marketing related things, I was happy to see that the way that we rolled it out and, kind of the way that we engaged with external content and a lot of our partners resulted in just kind of this consumption of the timeline for, at least 2 days for the token launch, which I thought was really good. And then what it actually resulted in was that, for those first 24 hours of the token going live, we were, I believe, the sixth most traded token in the entire market,
Amazing.
which was a big accomplishment. Most tokens, even like Bera and Movement and these tokens, they don't even get to that point, during their first 24 hours. And so that being able to achieve that as a much smaller team than a lot of these bigger tokens that have launched, and being able to have that sort of social dominance was something that I thought was, I was very proud of that because, our team is only a few people, and still being able to accomplish that was significant. And so I was very happy to see that. I was talking a lot on Twitter. I was like, "Oh, this is great," and I was doing a lot of posts and getting some good engagement. And so I think that was, it's hard to say like exactly what single decision led to that type of social engagement, but I think it was a consolidation of a lot of the things that we had planned up to that point, a lot of the ways that we had actually executed that marketing, that yielded that type of interest. And so that was definitely, I think, the number one thing that I was most proud of.
Amazing, amazing. And with the benefit of hindsight, is there anything you'd approach differently if you could go back?
Yeah, I think the main thing I would do might be in terms of timing. I do think that it was definitely executed very well. I think we actually kind of hit the market before it started, like all the tariff stuff started flowing in. So I think timing wasn't bad. But I do think that if we were to do it over again, if I had to choose one thing, yeah, maybe waiting until, especially in terms of the U.S. regulations, you know, 3, 4 months, waiting until that goes over and seeing what happens with that, and then launching might have been safer. But I don't necessarily think it was that detrimental. I think that especially over the long term, it's just kind of things will resolve. I hope in the U.S. and things would get a little bit better, and I'm optimistic about that. But I think that's one thing that, like in hindsight, could have perfected that. I think a few protocols really got very lucky with timing, like Movement. I think they timed things very well, and but you can't always time it perfectly. Like I think we're in a very similar boat to Berachain and to Nillion and to a few other protocols that have launched around the same time that we did, which is just like that's the market does what it does, especially around tariffs and that kind of stuff. But I think in the long term, the timing of the exact date matters less. But if I could change one thing, that might be one optimization to make.
Totally. So, moving on to the next aspect of the discussion, airdrops can be truly a powerful tool for early adoption. But beyond just giving away tokens, how do you ensure that airdrop fosters real community involvement and creates a long lasting value?
Yeah, this is a very controversial topic. Of course, there's if sometimes if you don't do an airdrop in the way that people want to, Twitter is not very happy. But I think airdrops are good mechanisms for actually rewarding and ensuring long-term power users and actually creating a community of users that engage with your product even after TGE and even after there's like rewards to be made, right? Because they engaged with the product because they like it, and rewarding those users I think is important. I don't think that like not rewarding farmers is like you should definitely reward them to some degree, but at the same time, the people who are really going to benefit your protocol in the long term are those power users that are really sticking with what you're building and that have been using it even before you had like a clear reward system and are there because they like the product, not because necessarily they want to reward. And I am actually pretty happy with the way that we did our airdrop to some degree. I think that we executed it in a way where, like farmers, not all of them were that happy, but a lot of the power users that we really curated over the past 4 to 8 months, and really the guys that tried chain abstraction first, because we launched Universal X, and that's kind of our main platform at the moment that we have been pushing as kind of like the first chain abstracted trading platform, really the first chain abstracted app that was launched a few months ago. Those users that not only tried it but have stuck with it and been using it continually, have been talking about it, being able to really reward those users, I think, was a good move, because what it created was that now post TGE, in retrospect, because we had the opportunity to really reward those users for just using the product genuinely and naturally and talking about it genuinely. A lot of, like, the vast majority of them are still using it every day and talking about it on Twitter. Like, there's no rewards for, I mean, they're just doing it because they like the product. And like, I think this is great. Like, we're not telling them, hey, we're going to, give you some tokens if you talk about it. It's just because, they're talking about it every day. They're using it every day, and because we had the opportunity to reward them during our TGE process and as an airdrop, they felt like they were kind of, they felt like their activity was seen to that degree, and it gives them some reason and some kind of attachment to the protocol that they want to keep using it further. And so I think from an external standpoint, if I were, again, my own protocol and I was starting over again, and I was deciding how I want to do airdrops, I would definitely 100% prioritize how can you find who those real users are, who those power users are that are actually using your product and that have been using it from early on, and that you can bet on to continue using it and to continue talking about it. Those are going to, especially same thing in the long term, are going to be the most beneficial for that growth, because they, I guess the word would be unconditionally use your protocol. And rewarding them, I think, is the most important thing, because it makes sure that they stay, and it makes sure that they feel like they can really be a part of that community. I think we, at this point, even after TGE, a lot of protocols, after they launch a token, they basically lose a big part of their community, and they don't really have a lot of activity anymore. But I think we've actually, we're one of the few where you can still see a lot of that community on Twitter talking about it every day, especially with Universal X. There's definitely still a big inner circle there of people that use it, which I love to see, because I use Universal X every day, and to see that okay, people actually genuinely like using the product, and we actually have the opportunity to reward the vast majority of those community members that are still around today, I think was a good move, and that's how I would recommend other protocols to handle it as well.
Totally agree. Yeah. And I think that's a huge takeaway for anyone launching a TG. Don't just give tokens, but build a community that feels a sense of ownership. Now, a lot of people in the audience might be wondering about how they can benefit from being a party token holder. Can you shed some light on how token holders see value flowing back to them?
Yeah, I guess there's kind of two components of it. One of which I would consider to be more a matter of value accrual over time as the ecosystem grows, and the other being purely a point of like strict utility, right? So like these are, I think, are two things: utility in the sense of like how does a token actually grow in demand is one thing, but also how does the token actually be used is another thing. So in terms of like demand growth, I think Party really has always been to some degree a bet on the growth of our ecosystem, and then simultaneously a bet on the growth of chain abstraction. Because the way that Party works is that whenever a transaction is executed by a universal account, which for some context is our approach to chain abstraction, it's the way that you can have a unified balance across all chains through either Universal X or any other app that integrates it. Anytime a universal account executes a transaction, whether it's on our own product like Universal X or on any other app in the ecosystem that integrates it, Party is consumed in that process. And so as universal accounts scale, and as the usage of our chain abstraction solution scales, the usage of Party and the demand for Party simultaneously scales. And so it's the usage of this token is basically a one-to-one track of the usage and the demand for our own infrastructure. And so this is really important, because Party is, in some ways, because of that, a bet on the growth of universal accounts and on the growth of chain abstraction. And so value accrual happens as the ecosystem expands, and as universal accounts also grow in usage, as Universal X grows, and really as all of the apps that use universal accounts grow simultaneously. Because even if you have like one app that just does amazingly well, for some reason 1 month, that also kind of reflects on Party holders and just our ecosystem overall, because that token has been continually consumed in the growth of that application, because they're using universal accounts. Right now, the main app that is using universal accounts is Universal X, which of course has a lot of that continual daily usage. Right now, we are focusing on expanding universal accounts to more apps. We're actually going to be launching, ideally, the first 10 to 11 like universal account enabled external applications in the next few weeks, maybe ideally within the next 4 weeks. We're going to have these go live, which I think is going to be very exciting, because we're going to basically say, here's we're gonna do an announcement whenever it's ready, and say, here's the first 10 apps that are fully powered by universal accounts. Go use it, go try it. And of course, throughout all those apps, Parties being consumed whenever you do those transactions, and then also through Universal X, and then as that scales, that the same is true. So that's on the value accrual side long term, in terms of like, what does this actually infrastructurally play a role in the ecosystem? The second thing I think is also important, which is like, what's the direct utility of the token? And Of course, everybody always says, "Oh, you can stake, you can do governance, all that kind of stuff." But that's one thing. I think importantly, we're also going to be really using Party as a community engagement mechanism within Universal X as well. A big part of our community today has been formed around Universal X because we saw almost unexpectedly that Universal X has a lot of product market fit. Whereas, like, I tell the story sometimes, but when we first launched Universal X back in December, it was initially like it was always meant to be its own app, but it even like way early on started as mostly a demo, which then turned into Universal X, which kind of was a very early app, and we weren't sure if it was really going to scale that much. And then we just saw this amazing interest, which then turned into what it is today, which is this full on trading app. And we built this community around that, and we want to continue curating that. And I think Party is a good mechanism to do that. So, like, we've thought about doing like launch pool campaigns and some other things, some other sort of like maybe even token sales on Universal X and some things that we've talked about in some articles that are going to hopefully start quite soon. That of course Party will be the kind of core mechanism for using within. So you can almost think about Party as like kind of similar to like the utility of BNB to some degree, which is that like, BNB has a lot of like user facing utility and that you can use it for those things like launch pools and whatnot and, things within their own native applications like Binance Wallet. But also it plays a role in terms of like having infrastructural demand as that ecosystem grows. So Party is the same way. It grows with infrastructural demand as universal accounts, which to some degree is even broader than like a specific chain ecosystem because it reflects all chains and everybody that integrates it. But also simultaneously, it has a user-facing utility of being used in Universal X for things like launch pools and other direct community engagements, having that direct utility. We're also going to do things like transaction fee discounts and all these interesting things for both our own apps and external apps. And then you have that, kind of infrastructural demand as well. So all that being said, I do think that like not only for Party, but also just more broadly, I think it's important to have those two parts of utility, the core demand that happens, even regardless of if you want to interact with all the community things. That demand represents, the usage of universal accounts and the usage of that infrastructure. And then, of course, if you want to be an active participant, you actually want to use the token, then you have that option too as well.
Love that. Tabasco, as the market evolves, how do you see the role of community driven initiatives changing for TGE projects? Like with shifting trends in Web3, what should projects prioritize to stay ahead of the curve?
Yeah, I think community engagements are very hit or miss, especially pre-TGE. I think going from pre-TGE to post-TGE represents a big shift, and you really see who in your community is actually there because of the product that you're building and who is there because of the token. And so I think like you can use pre-TGE community engagement to do a lot of growth and to really attract a lot of users. And we even did this as well. Like, before we launched our token, we did what we call party diamonds, which on Universal X was basically a way to say, if you trade on Universal X right now, you will acquire diamonds and that will eventually be converted into an airdrop whenever we launch a token. I think that community engagement was effective. It did definitely attract a lot of farmers, a lot of people that were there because they wanted to farm the token, which is totally fine. But simultaneously, if you say, okay, here's this like community activity that I'm going to do, and I'm pre-GG as a project, the playbook is changing. I have my product now. I want to like my goal is product growth, and so what should I do? Farming is totally okay, but I think the main thing that I would always prioritize in this sense is like if you're going to do farming, if you're going to do these kind of activities that are clearly for the purpose of like generating some growth, ideally 10% of the users that come in from that end up staying as long-term users. And you need to find a way to reward them and to basically clearly differentiate who are these long-term users that are in my community that I'm activating with this campaign, and how do I continue activating them after I TG and after these core campaigns. Because pre-TGE, it's very hard to distinguish who's actually here legitimately. As like who actually wants to use this product. Now you can identify them for sure by talking to people directly, but you have so much engagement and so much volume happening at the same time that it's hard to sift through that noise sometimes. And so I think doing those broader campaigns before is fine, but definitely identifying who is genuinely here because they are using the product, who are my power users, who is that core community that is going to stay, and then continuing to engage them and activate that community, I think is really important. I don't think products do this enough. I think that again, what happens a lot of the time is that they launch a token, and maybe they lose a lot of these farmers, but they feel like they've lost a lot more than that, and they look and they say, oh, it's not enough, and then they kind of lose motivation. But if you keep pushing with that core community that for sure is using your product, and we're fortunate enough to have quite a number of these individuals that actually quite a large community at this point that is still using it, and were power users beforehand. We actually acquired a lot of those users because of those early campaigns, because they discovered Universal X, because they heard of all these kind of different things that we were doing pre TGE, and now they've converted into these long term users that now post TGE are still using it. And so prioritizing for those users, trying to reward those users and engage them, I think is really important. And if I could do one thing, I think that's what I would recommend is how do you format your community activations in a way, and really after TGE especially, how do you continue to activate those users and reward them to some degree? This, I think, is really how you can curate that longer term growth beyond kind of the noise that you get pre TGE.
Great insights indeed. So, with the rise of new markets and the user base coming online, how should TG projects, adapt their strategies to attract and retain a global audience? Should they just be focusing more on regional targeting or global scalability? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, this is a good question. Our own growth curve is very much very, very global. I think even more so than a lot of projects in that we have a lot of traction in the Asia markets, and so particularly within like Mandarin speaking communities, we have a lot of traction over there. Then also we have a lot of demand and a lot of traction both within like North America, that's where I'm based, as well as within kind of more international markets, like including other Asian countries and that kind of stuff. We get a lot of traction. Then also in like African countries, we have a big chunk of our community there. I think having a strategy for each independent region is really important, and we've actually done a lot of this for Universal X. Like we have a strategy specifically for like the Vietnamese community. We have a very in-depth strategy for like the Mandarin speaking community. We have our own strategy for like the more Western users. We have a strategy for other international kind of regions. And so I think looking at things from a regional basis and trying to like really address different groups of users, because to be honest, these users have different expectations, they have different needs. You have to communicate with them, in some cases from different sources, from different audiences, and even in different languages a lot of the time to really attract these users. But we found that like I think a mistake that some products make is that they focus too much on one user, or sorry, on one region, or they try to be too broad and like only English speaking, and they're just going to try to see who they can attract through kind of just basically being a North American project. That's fine, but again, I think you really miss a lot of those power users that you could be acquiring if you go into these regions themselves. If you actually find advocates within these regions that can talk about you, that can talk about your product, that know these users directly. So what we've done is we've basically found ambassadors. We found people that are there to basically tell users within these different regions about our product and to engage with them, because they know these users directly, they know the culture, they know the language, and so they can go and engage with them on our behalf, and we can work with them directly. And so being able to have these sort of entrance into these different ecosystems, into these different regions, was really important for us. And I definitely think that this is a massive unlock in terms of growth, in terms of just having a diverse community, because I think especially recently the purely like like being based in SF and having all of your communications like being strictly English and just trying to acquire this. I think this is also kind of an old playbook that is not necessarily the way to do it anymore. I think addressing like global markets is definitely very important. And yeah, I think we actually have some of our team members that are basically specifically personalities for like the Mandarin speaking community. While I focus more on kind of like the international side with particularly English speaking. And so I think this is more important than most people realize, and a lot of projects don't realize this until it's too late. I think even like I've seen a few products that have like even some of the bigger products recently, like Movement and some of the other guys, they have like Chinese accounts and accounts for Korea and like these different things when they're addressing these different markets. And this is a smart move, and this is like we've done similar things, and I think this is something that a lot of products miss, but is incredibly important in my opinion.
Love that. Looking at the broader Web3 space, should projects be thinking about multi chain strategies from the start, or is it something that they should tackle like after launch?
Yeah, this is another good question. My hot take is no. I think projects now, especially with chain abstraction, should focus on one chain that they want to deploy on and just deploy there. I think the era of being a multi-chain app is gone effectively. It's a waste of time and resources. I've had a lot of conversations with apps recently, and they've realized that hold on through chain abstraction, we don't need to be multi-chain anymore. This is actually a waste of our time because we don't need to manage liquidity on 4 or 5 different chains. We don't need to redeploy our contracts in these different chains. We can just be deployed in one place and focus our engineering resources on this one chain and just basically acquire users from all these other ecosystems because of chain abstraction. And so I think with chain abstraction, multi-chain, trying to go multi-chain now is a distraction, and it is actually not helpful for projects. And so I would say find a chain that fits your technology best. Don't go to a chain because of, oh, there's a lot of users here. I think that's also outdated now. Go to a chain that fits your tech best and that will actually serve your application best. Deploy there and focus your resources on growing within that tech stack. That's how you will build the best app, not by building a mediocre app and trying to deploy it across 10 different chains. That's absolutely a waste of time and resources that I think we're moving past now as an ecosystem. Because with chain abstraction, I can go and I can deploy on my Arbitrum Orbit chain or whatever, my Avalanche L1, and I can acquire users that have funds on Base and Arbitrum and Solana and Ethereum or whatever. And I don't need to be deployed on all these chains to acquire these users. They can just go and use my app, and it doesn't matter where they have funds, right? So this is really really important. And yeah, and again, this is actually a pretty new take. I think people will realize this more over time, but stop wasting your time deploying on multiple chains, deploy in one place, and just use solutions like chain abstraction to acquire users elsewhere. And you're going to be a much more effective team for doing that.
Love hearing that. What's the next big milestone for Particle that you're excited about? Anything coming up that you can share with us?
Yeah, a lot of things. It has been a very busy past few weeks, and will continue to be even busier next few weeks. And so we have really two major things that I think are going to be some of the most like significant evolutions in our roadmap in recent times. The first is going to be Universal XV3. Universal XV3, we've kind of gone through these evolutions of like Universal XV1, which is a very, very simple trading interface, like Uniswap style. We evolved that to Universal XV2, which was kind of like introducing charts and all these like cool UI features. Now we're transitioning that to Universal XV3, which is going to introduce like really advanced features like limit orders and maybe even like some other kind of like more advanced trader features that we've had a lot of requests for. And so that's coming very soon. Hopefully over the next like few weeks, we'll be able to give some more information about what that'll look like and then launch that quite soon. Simultaneously, over the next few weeks, we're going to be launching what we call cohort one of universal account apps. I talked about this briefly a little while ago, but basically we're going to be launching the first 10 apps approximately that will be using universal accounts to be chain abstracted. And so we are going to quite soon announce who those apps are, and then you're going to be able to go and use those apps and actually use those apps in a way that's completely chain abstracted. We're going to have a pretty diverse set of apps. I can't say exactly which ones yet, but it's going to be apps from a lot of different ecosystems, from a lot of different verticals, different types of apps, and some pretty big names as well. And so quite soon you're going to be able to go and use all these apps, try them out. They're going to be fully chain abstracted, and I think it's going to be my hope is that it's really going to be a light bulb moment, not only for our own ecosystem, but really for chain abstraction more broadly. Because up to this point, chain abstraction has really only existed in vacuums, right? So in some demos or some apps like Universal X. But all of a sudden, we're going to have this shift where it's like, okay, this is real now. Like there's all these like big apps, like these tier one apps that are using chain abstraction now. And I think that's going to really unlock the floodgates for a lot of other apps that are going to seek this out. And so I'm very optimistic. I think it's going to be a huge jump, not only for us, but for the entire vertical. And that's happening very soon. So first ever 10 external chain abstracted apps are being launched very soon. And the next major evolution of Universal X is being launched very soon, all over the next like really 1 month. And so these things are really going to shape the next few quarters of our roadmap. And so I'm very excited about this. It's a lot of work, but I think it's going to be a big next step for us. So those are the two major things that I'm most excited for.
Amazing, amazing. That's it. I think it's safe to say that there's always something exciting on the horizon with projects like Particle. With the rise of L2 solutions and new scaling technologies, How important do you think it is for a project to integrate these solutions early in their journey? Should like scalability be a core focus right from the start, or is it something that can be addressed as the project grows and user demand increases?
I think products just deploy in whatever chain they think is best that meets their performance needs. And so if you want to deploy on Solana because you think that the transaction speeds are really important for your application, then great, do that. If you think that you want to deploy on some specific L2 because it has some performance property, or you want to use like proof of liquidity for Berachain or whatever, then deploy there. I think that this shouldn't be like, I don't think products should look at it like, oh, I need to eventually address, like I need to deploy on Ethereum or whatever, and then eventually address, like scalability later on. I think it's definitely like you deploy where your app is going to be, like the needs of your app are going to be met best, and then move from that point. And if that happens to be like an app chain, like if you need to go and deploy on, like I don't know, some roll up, or like, launch your own chain or whatever, then so be it. I mean, just deploy wherever it makes most sense for your app, and don't cut yourself short because you want to deploy in some bigger ecosystem first and then address that later. Just deploy whatever works best, and then scale from there. And don't deploy on multiple chains because that's a waste of time. Just deploy in one place that you think is best for your app, and that's the most important thing that I can always recommend, because there's no going wrong with, like, if you're a Berachain app and you want to take advantage of their liquidity, proof of liquidity system, then perfect, launch on Berachain and don't look back. If you are a very advanced app that has very, very specific needs in terms of the architecture of the chain that you're deploying on, go launch an app chain, go launch an Avalanche L1, go launch a rollup with Caldera, whatever. That choice should be based on the technical needs of your application, and you should only make that choice one time. And this is my take on that.
Amazing. So yeah, as we come to the end of today's stream, Tabasco, any final thoughts for the projects out there getting ready for their token launch?
I hope you're not getting ready for it in this market. It's not a very good time, I don't think, especially with the tariffs and everything. But I think if you are getting ready for it, regardless, as somebody who's gone through that process now, there's a lot of noise that happens. It's a very hectic, thing that goes on, and it feels very overwhelming. But it's very, yeah. I memean, it's a great experience. It's a lot of fun, and I had a lot of fun doing it. And it's a part of the crypto experience. You get your badge of honor whenever you've TGE'd, and then you move on to continue scaling. And so, yeah, my main thing would just be focus on scaling your product, build a product, build some revenue before you launch your token. Then launch your token, focus on scaling your core user base, focus on scaling that product, and in the long term, you'll be set up for success. This is my opinion.
All right. Thanks again for tuning in, everyone. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you, Tabasco. Make sure, everyone, you follow Octo and Particle and stay updated on our latest developments. And there's a lot more to come, and you wouldn't want to miss it. So keep an eye on the road ahead. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
All right. Bye.